Mr. Harold Mohn was born August 28, 1916, in Lebanon, Pennsylvania. He was an only child and had many cousins. He stayed in the same household until was shipped off overseas. He played a lot of baseball in his free time. He also was in plays at the local theater. He graduated high school 4 years early. He skipped 7th, 8th, and 9th and 10th grade. He met his future wife at a local play he was in. They saw each other and then made up afterwards at a coffee shop. They then started a happy marriage before the war. He was drafted into the Army and was shipped to Fort Indiantown Gap for training. Once at the Gap, he received his basic training. He included rifle training, marching, and other basic skills. This prepared him to go off to advanced training. He learned all he needed to know. He then was shipped off to Kentucky for advanced training. This is where he learned to become a tank recoverist. He learned how to take apart tanks and how they worked. He learned how to put them back together. He knew every tank like the back of his hand. He then went overseas 20 days after D-Day. He went right to work getting the tanks off the beach. They were all over the place in different conditions. His company had their work cut out for them. They worked quickly and cleared the beach and moved on. They then went throughout Europe following the front line. They stopped at every major battle. Some of these were Battle of the Bulge and the Rhineland. They took apart tanks and shipped them home all the time. He rarely got free time, and when he did, it was for a week or so. He went to Paris to look at the city and other cities in Europe. He was then shipped back home to New Jersey. He took the bus to the Gap and then home to Lebanon. His fame came after the war when he got back. He said he did not do much during the war, but we all know he did. We wrote to military figures on both sides of the war. He never talked about the war with any of them. It was always about something they did in the war. He wrote to Omar Bradley, George Patton, and Robert Spears. His most recent was Robert Spears. He was Hitler's right-hand man in rebuilding Germany. He wrote many books in which Mr. Mohn has signed, and the first in the country. He also has many letters from him. He was then invited twice to Spears' home in Germany. Spears knew everything about them before they even arrived. Mr. Mohn also saw the original plans to rebuild Germany. Later, Mr. Robert Spears passed away, and his sister and his wife invited Mr. Mohn personally. He also believes that he has the last letter Spears ever wrote a day before his death. He also has many letters and pictures signed by the other people and generals. He has also very good friends with Dick Winters. Mr. Winters was famous by the famous HBO miniseries Band of Brothers. He then was also personally invited to Mr. Winters' funeral as a guest of honor. Mr. Mohn also was made famous by his poetry. He has written hundreds of poems for himself and other people. He has his work in the graveyard of Normandy. He has read his poetry in many ceremonies. These included many famous people and generals. He also writes a poem for his wife every day. He keeps all of his poems on a table in his living room. We read his poems in the parade of Myerstown last year. He also has many awards for his poetry in foreign countries. The best thing is that he has never read poetry in his life. He says that he does not want to be found of copying. His poetry just comes to him naturally. He wakes up in the middle of the night and writes poetry. He says if he does not, he will forget it and it will be lost forever. Mr. Mohn is remembered for his service and for his work outside the military. He worked long and hard in the field to help protect our country. He worked long and hard to help the world with his poetry. He is the kindest man you will ever meet and will do anything for you. Thank you, Mr. Mohn, for your wonderful service and beautiful poetry. Here is a poem written by Mr. Harold Mohn. When your hopes and dreams are shattered and cause you grief and pain, do not despair, but start anew, your cherished goals to gain. Do not lose faith within yourself if failure comes your way, but battle on with your head held high and find a brighter day. Just as sun follows rain and daylight follows night, your hopes and dreams are not in vain if you keep God in sight.